Resources, inspiring interviews, business practices, and practical advice to take your art career to the next level. Join Sergio Gomez in today's Artist Next Level and get ready to take control of your career.
Well, hello, my next level friend. Welcome to a brand new episode of the Artist Next Level podcast. This is a special edition episode in which I am interviewing artists from around the world as they are stuck at home during the coronavirus lockdown. Today, I'm very excited to have with me remotely Alvaro Amat, and he is an artist, he's an architect, and he's a design director at the Field Museum here in Chicago. We're going to talk about the direction in which museums are going right now. What are the conversations that are happening on how we are evolving on the other side. Hi, Alvaro. How are you today?
Hi, how are you, Sergio? How are you? How's everything for you?
It's going great. Thank you so much for joining us today here in Breakfast with Sergio. And today I wanted to chat with you because you have a unique perspective on everything that's happening right now in your role, first as an artist, as well as an architect, for the, I don't know how many years you've been a design director at the Field Museum in Chicago, which is an institution that is known worldwide. And so you have a big role there, and you have a good insight on what's happening, the conversations that are, being, struggling in the museum world, which I think for us as artists is very important as well. So let me ask you, you have a really nice set in the back of you. You are not at the museum right now, right?
No. Currently, the museum is closed. It's been closed since March, and we don't plan to open until mid-July. And we are very aware of, how to open safely. So right now, I'm in the sketch. It's a sketch of the project that we did for the renovation of the museum a couple of years ago, and with the hanging gardens and the new big dinosaur right the other side. so yeah, I thought it was kind of the role I have at the museum, which is to oversee the design. I work with exhibition designers, graphic designers, media producers, sculptors, architects, etc. And we have a team of people that are in charge of creating the environment, right? It's just how do you flow through an exhibit, how you feel immersed, and how do you transport people to these new, unique spaces, right? So that's more or less my role. And
that's fabulous. And I think for all of us who live in Chicago, or anyone who has visited Chicago and has been at the Field Museum, it's one of those places that, it's part of your history as a Chicagoan or someone who comes and visit. Like you can come to Chicago without going to the Field Museum and the Art Institute, right? They're like hand in hand. Having so much history there. And, I remember when I was a student, being there many times with my sketch pad and drawing, and it's been part of my artistic formation as well. How long have you been working at the Field?
I've been working at the Field since 2007. At the end of the year, I started there, which is 12 to 13. I'm about to be 13 years this year.
13.
Yeah. And it's been a great event. I mean, I've been starting from just the design of the exhibits, now also taking over, the part of graphics and collaborating with marketing, and then also working on the media. I mean, that was the latest addition to our team, is to the multimedia, and integrating the experiences. So they're like this holistic set of elements that create an ambient, right?
Right.
Yeah. It's been very interesting to see how things have been integrating, but also now with the new challenges that we have ahead of us. How do we adapt?
Right.
And it's not a small feat. That's trying to see
I
how
know
we do
it.
this.
And that's exactly, I think that's a perfect transition right into what I want to chat with you a little bit because of your role there. It really, this came to interrupt everything, every industry, every field, every aspect of life. And I've been thinking a lot about museums lately, just myself, I've been chatting with so many artists and I thought, well, but museums are also such an integral part of our culture, and also for us as artists, in our formation, and museums are, based on people gathering coming in, being in contact with each other. In the case of the Field Museum, also many of the exhibits are, touchable, that or include all your senses.
Yeah.
And all those dynamics, what are some of the conversations that, museums like the Field and others are really struggling with right now?
Yeah. I mean, there is the difficult conversations that we have to do in terms of survival, right? I mean, the idea is, how does an institution that it relies on visitation, relies on people coming in, paying a ticket, buying T-shirts, and getting a sandwich, all that is being disrupted, and many museums are struggling big time. I mean, this is one of the parts that we are trying to figure out, is how do we just survive? Right. And how do we sustain ourselves moving forward? So that's one layer of conversations. The other layer of conversations is, how do we reopen in these conditions? I mean, we cannot stay closed forever. We would not survive. And at the same time, museums are important in the community. There's a lot of services that museums do educationally. People still have to see fossils. There's a lot of kids now that are not in school, and they are relying on museum content to continue being educated about science and about art and about culture. So museums do have a role in society, and it's important to keep them open in a way, but also do that safely. And how do we think about flow, entrance, masks, social distancing? And it's a very dynamic situation. I mean, we've been looking at the latest in the science and in design in terms of thinking how people move in space, and what does it mean what are the latest research in terms of masks and surfaces that are shared. Museums have made a huge shift for touchable screens in the last decade.
Right, I remember that. Yeah,
they're everywhere. I mean, they're everywhere. You can see little fingers in every surface, because it's the number one thing kids do now, right? Is the touching the screens. There used to be buttons before, all the red buttons, right? And they shifted more. But I mean, there are spaces in the museum where there's a gallery, one single gallery. We have over 50 buttons, 3 touchables, and 5 screens. One space only. Wow. There's one exhibition, we have 47 touchable screens, and we rely on those to provide content.
Right.
So there's a lot of discussion about, I mean, we cannot just move them around and remove them.
Right.
We cannot just reprogram them, but the ideal would be to make the touchable elements an option. If people want to engage with them, provide signage, the opportunity of providing education about washing your hands and hygiene practices, looking at cleaning products, looking also at hand sanitizers. I mean, there's a lot of things that we are experimenting with right now, and the goal is to make a safe environment for people.
Right.
But at the same time, meaningful experiences, because many of these little elements, they are key in the experience. So how do we keep, for instance, people who are have vision impairments? You cannot just remove all the touchables in a museum and then you alienate a whole section of
segment,
the population, a big segment. So we will be working with the community to figure out what are the best practices. Like, people should still be allowed to touch things, but they should be guided. Maybe they should be tours are specific for people with vision impairments. I mean, we have to figure out how do we engage people who still need to touch. But the big thing is, it changes the way we think about the museum as this box where people gather, and also how the museum can expand its reach beyond its 4 walls, right? There's a lot of discussion too about resources. We used the first 3 months of 2.5 months of the pandemic to work with our Department of Education and create online resources, videos, things that kids you could use in conjunction with their programs in school.
Right.
And making sure that they have access, right? Because we have a lot of content that we would like to get out there. So educators have the opportunity to enhance their presence online. So that's one element. And then there's a lot of discussions we're having about what it means to come to a museum, what is really key, the experience. So we have a webinar this week in the Association of Midwestern Museums. And it's a bunch of designers, lighting designers, sound designers, to think about, well, not everything is about touch. It's also about feel, smell, motion, lighting, music, hearing.
Other senses,
temperature. So how do we rely less on just, I mean, right now museums are either you see something or you touch something, right? But if we could do more of working with darkness and brightness and create a sense of ambient with sound, and maybe we can work with even with temperature and things like that. So there's a lot of brainstorming going around, and it's very exciting on one end.
Yeah.
On the other, it's just reacting to the conditions, but in another way, it's also opening opportunities.
And I think it's a kind of, as you mentioned, all those things kind of accelerating the pace. So we were going in that direction anyway, probably, in the future on how things evolve in the technology and the more immersive experiences. But now kind of this is just like pushing and accelerating all this to go faster, to find, to find the ways to continue the enrichment of life, which, a museum is part of that, what it provides for us culturally, as well as experiencing and the memories and the things that it creates. And I think like this whole pandemic is like pushing all those things that were already maybe in the horizon, like right in our face. Like we have no choice right now, but to figure out how to make the best of them. And so I like, the idea of it's a challenge, but it's an opportunity as well. To come up with new alternatives.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of discussions that we've been having in the past. There was a nice conversation I had with some friends and colleagues from other museums in the East Coast about how do we make the museum present beyond its four walls, right? So how do we make the museum more omnipresent? So there could be, travelable exhibits, mini museum versions that you could just send to libraries. And how do you could get a kit at your house that will allow you to collect insects, and there's a lot of discussion about that, and there being some marketing tools and some kits you can buy, but it's always very shy, and it has been done in depth. And also using this medium like Zoom meetings, and how do you create virtual guided tours and things like that. And this situation has brought all that conversation to the forefront. It's almost like things were in line and were happening, but I mean, it was a matter of adaptation, and now it's a necessity, right? We have to do it. So I'm seeing some internships that we're putting together to experiment creating toolkits that people can use at home, that they could download. Maybe there are places where you can 3D print stuff. There are places where you can get loan collections. I mean, there's different ways we try to bring the museum beyond their four walls, but it's going to take a while. I mean, this process of transformation, I see it more than just adaptation. It's an opportunity for redefine what the museum is, and how do we access audiences that usually don't go to museums. Like now with the discussion about Black Lives Matter and how museums tend to be, high elitist institutions, how do we make them more accessible for a bigger audience, right? For an audience that is more diverse. And all those conversations are very interesting and challenging and redefining of what the role of museums should be in the world.
Yeah, very interesting. I found myself like now, especially at the beginning, like the first month of the quarantine, I am, visiting more virtual museums than ever before. I went to some artist talks at MoMA, just with my phone, because they were having, things like that virtually. So, making that virtual world being an integral part of the museum, has been something that's so important to keep us engaged and to keep remembering, the museum is there and is doing something that I might want to participate and be part of it, and fully accessible in my device,
Yes. I think museums reacted very quickly to put everything online, and people had it was almost like saturated market of offers of, you can go see all these museums, like, where do I start?
Exactly.
And we could see an engagement uptick in online, and then about a week after it started to go down a little bit. It's not low. I think it's still decent. But the goal is, how do we keep that level of engagement and then integrate it with measured visits? And as we open slowly, how do we keep people engaged, right? Online and with all these things. So it has to be a way of integrating, because things come in waves and things are moving really quickly with the pandemic. It could change in a week, and we have to figure out how to adapt. But we are incorporating new media. We're incorporating new ways of engaging. One of the things we were dealing in the museum is apps. The field is very resistant to do apps because we believe in being there and being present. But it's at the same time, we have a huge building. And one of the challenges we have in our museum is not about how many people are in the museum, but they can spread. It's just an easy way it's not really unsafe in that way because of the, height and the air. It's easy to distance people, but it's also to get lost. It's very easy to get lost. So we're creating journeys. So let's say you have an interest in animals. So you can go to the journey of animals, and it takes you in one direction. And then when you enter, it's not like before you could just go around and browse. Now it's going to go more directed.
Nice.
And we're thinking of having apps where you can actually look at your taste and figure out how to customize your own tour, right? And those things were never thought about before. People were just, no, let them go in. You have a map, figure it out, get lost.
The typical museum map, right?
Yeah, it's like you have your own museum map.
You don't know how to close it again.
Yeah. It's impossible to close. And we make it on purpose, so it's impossible to close.
Okay. I knew there was something behind that.
Yeah, we are just perverse that way. No, the goal is to actually make your maps available on your phone, and then figure out the scenic route getting from A to B, or what are the highlights, and if you're here, how you go to see all the important things so you don't miss anything. So all that is, and now it's necessary to do all that. Right. It's not only a necessity; is actually an opportunity.
Excellent. Well, Alvaro, we could be talking about this for a long time, but I know you are a busy guy, and also our friends. I'm sure they have some more work to do today. But I want to say, Alvaro, thank you so much for sharing this. And now you are an artist yourself. So what have you been doing in your also confinement these days as an artist outside of the museum?
So I took the opportunity working from home, and I don't have a long commute anymore. So I am enjoying the 4 extra hours I have every day
right.
to do some. So I renovated. I'm in my basement. I'm not going to show it. It's pretty gross. But the idea is I'm starting to do some sculpture. I'm working with some puzzles, but also I'm engaging with nature. One of the things that I explored, you can see these little drawings here, is creating sculptures with plants, and I'm thinking of making living sculptures. So I've been working with mosses and plants, and my wife's kind of funny. She's laughing about me, my little experiments where things rot and die, and I have to do it again. But I've been working with a couple of sculptures remotely to create a couple of collaborations, and it's been a really interesting time because it's incorporating what I'm learning at the museum, what I do as a sculptor, thinking about architecture and space and experience, and how do I bring that all together. So it's really exciting time for me.
Excellent. Well, Alvaro, where can our friends find you on social media?
Well, I recommend them to follow the Field Museum if they don't already do. So fieldmuseum.org. And we are also in Instagram. And I personally have my own Instagram. I have 2 Instagram accounts. One is more personal, like where I put goofy stuff, like for the family, which is Alamat Mar.
Okay.
But my artistic website is Varaltam. It's VARALTAM, Varaltam, which is kind of a made-up name with my name.
Excellent.
And that's where I'm exploring nature and sculpture and trying to resume my practice as an artist.
Excellent. And I should mention that you also have a TED Talk that our friends can also watch online as well. So very interesting.
Yeah, TED Quincy. It was in Quincy, Illinois, and we were talking about small towns and cities and art and how do we create culture.
Exactly. Well, Alvaro, thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Thank you for being here. I want to say to all our friends, thank you so much for joining us. Hope you have an awesome day. Thank you, Alvaro.
Thank you, Sergio. Thanks for the honor.
No problem. Goodbye, everybody. Have a great day. See you next time.
Check out our website at www.theartistnextlevel.com, where you will find our podcast library, learn about our upcoming webinars, find resources relevant to your career, and much more. Thanks for listening to today's podcast, and we'll see you at the next level.